So lately, I've been reflecting a lot on which direction corporate interests and economists want America to start heading. In those fields, everyone and their dog is saying that all workers in America should be priming to learn computer science and programming. It seems they're hoping for urban economies to enter the fray of software specialization to have us compete with India, Vietnam, and Japan in this field. Most likely because they feel it would be lucrative to invest in the domestic workforce's capacity to cultivate economies based in code for corporations to sell. Never mind how ridiculous and arbitrary it is for market forces to be deciding over our fate and what everyone's aptitudes should be. I've studied both computer science and economics. Specialized economies are extremely fault-prone against the eventual proliferation and perhaps even the obsolescence of their specialty. And the model in itself is inefficient and obsolete. And on top of that, as a former student in computer science, I know what software is. And yes, computer software is amazing, but it is no basis for a specialized economy. Certainly not under capitalism. Even putting aside my own convictions on copyright, piracy in its own right poses a serious risk to the profitability of such an economy. And furthermore, anti-capitalist and decentralized tendencies are part of programming and software's entire legacy in innovation and the desire for any software in the first place. That's basically the entire legacy of GNU and Linux. The only basis for commercial enterprises in software is hardware. The reason for having a capitalist software industry is for complementing machines and making them comprehensible for end users, to justify the implementation, mass production, and sale of consumer hardware, which would be a far more sensible basis for a specialist economy. That's why companies like IBM, Acorn, and Apple had arranged for software to be tailor-made for the hardware manufactured in their names. Too bad most of our consumer hardware is manufactured under corporations in China. For an operating system or a program to be developed for compatibility with different sets of hardware, the service is essentially the software in itself, which would be much better off as a communally owned asset than as a commercial product or service. Why do you think people would rather use Linux for a universal system than Solaris? I'll even venture to guess that you're more likely to have heard of Linux than Solaris, because for a system to be able to complement a variety of machines would require a prolific community effort. Even at a corporate setting, programmers porting software to different machines requires consultations from outsiders to their companies on how that hardware works and how best to interface with it. And if that's the way it's going to be, community efforts are more likely to succeed and gain sympathy when held exclusively as the heritage of communities. Of course, the developers would rather be contributing to nonprofit projects that can't hold them liable against anything, except violations of open licenses and attribution, and codes of conduct. And in so doing, they'd make their best techniques available for public study and discourse. Or else, pirates and hackers will be finding ways to crack and observe, respecify, and re-implement code for open projects. Or else to just redistribute it. Of course, users would rather develop an interest in software that has a clear policy in ethics and transparency, and software that empowers them to do what they will with it. And with corporate efforts to indoctrinate the expansion of computer literacy, they would be transforming end users into capable hackers. Lest we forget corporations' embrace of open-source licensing in recent years. Whether corporate code be licensed under the GPL, the MPL, or the BSD or MIT license, if these new capable hackers are distributing and modifying that code and the knowledge on how to compile and install it, it wouldn't even be piracy. They would be doing so as they are legally permitted to by the code itself. And that's the point of open source licensing. Like it or not, this is entirely the humanly natural basis for the viral nature of the GNU General Public License. But that's not the only problem with attempting to cultivate a specialized economy around software. With commodities as nebulous and fickle as software, other economies may grow to resent trading their material goods for access to it when they can probably just as easily and more freely access it through Git or BitTorrent. And they may not continue trading with the specialists in software, especially if these economies are contributing insights and man-hours of their own into the software they use for work and play, or if quality and labor standards are not clear, and for a satisfactory level of transparency to be apparent, the GPL or some derivative or likeness thereof would have to be enforced, which still weakens the hold of commerce over software, nearly as much as Control-C, Control-V. They would be less likely to continue trade with such a silly post-industrial venture. But I'm not coming here to tell you not to learn to code. I learned to code. If you feel that coding is your calling, then do it. But I want you to come with a clear understanding of what software is and about its history, its culture, and its legacy. And most of it has been spent in opposition to commodification in commerce, and otherwise has very serious and nigh insurmountable vulnerabilities against expropriation via piracy, re-implementation, and open licensing. And most importantly, I want you to understand the precarious relationship a specialist in software will have to other industries. Time to face facts. This time American economists and businesses came up with a really stupid plan.